Politics is about popularity, you idiots. Obviously it is. That's how you win an election, by being popular. All right. Folks, normally I don't keep up with this back and forth thing, but considering how much time we spent in the previous episode, y'all know about pod saves? Guess who they had on? The second best leftist live streamer in his best oversized fit here. Looking good. If you didn't see the last segment, you kind of have to, by the way, because I'll be referencing it a bunch. Insane. They basically had a bunch of Kamala Harris's consultants on, and these people are all like, they go back and forth between working for the Democrats and working for corporations as consultants, and they had no idea why they lost, and they took no responsibility for losing, and it was infuriating. It was completely infuriating, just absolutely insufferable.
John Lovett, and guest hosting with me today is the massively popular streamer Leftist Dumbass himself. You just self-described.
That's okay, sure, fair. I say himbo, but damn.
Okay. Hasan Piker, welcome back.
It's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
After my conversation...
I like Hasan's fit. I do too. That's probably a cotton poplin work shirt, hence the two front pockets, and a very oversized, I'm guessing, chino. I don't know if those are double knee. I can't really see, but they look good.
Hasan Piker, welcome back.
It's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
After my conversation with Hasan, you'll hear my conversation with Seth Moulton. We talked about the Democratic Party. We talked about the controversy over his comments around trans athletes. Also on the feed right now, you can hear Dan's conversation with Jen O'Malley Dillon, Quentin Fulks, David Plouffe, and Stephanie Cutter about what went wrong in the Harris campaign. We're having a bunch of conversations about what we learned from the election, where we go from here, with a bunch of different voices, one of which is here today. People are mad that we talked to the Harris campaign. People are mad we're talking to you. People are mad.
I don't know if I intend to watch this whole thing, by the way, but I do want to get a feel for it.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But let's start with this.
There's Big Tent.
It's a big tent. It's a big tent. All right.
Got Dick Cheney in it.
It's got Dick Cheney in it. It's got Hasan Piker in it.
Yeah.
It's got Dan Osborne in it. It's got Seth Moulton in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Tent shouldn't maybe feature Dick Cheney in it, but everybody else I can have a conversation with.
Great. All right. Now look, the main pastime on the left, other than being mad for the last few weeks, is everyone saying how right they were all along about Democrats being out of touch and bound to lose.
Arrest me. Sorry. So I sat at this chair. Well, maybe not at this chair, but I had the offline interview with John. I think a month before the election, and a lot of the concerns that I brought up to him, it seemingly came across as somewhat prescient, where people went back to the footage, and I've been seeing comments that were rather positive about, okay, he said a lot of stuff there that was objectively correct seeming.
Yeah, I want to talk about one aspect of that, which is that you were saying, others were saying that, hey, Trump going on Rogan, Trump going on Theo Von, like something is happening here, and we need to understand it. We need to address it. It's real. And I remember my experience, it's seared in my mind of Trump being on Joe Rogan because of how, my path of understanding it, because what I saw first were a bunch of people taking clips and saying, wow, Rogan really didn't like Trump. Trump is a mess on this show. He comes across terribly. Rogan was giving Trump space to hang himself rhetorically. And then I watch it and I'm like, Trump did fucking great in this interview.
Yeah, he's very telegenic. That's the thing that a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the problem with getting your understanding of something like that just from clips. It's that if you're ideologically opposed to it, you're going to go and find the clips. And you have that issue. Both Democrats and Republicans do that, where they will take a broader Joe Biden speech and clip a portion of it where he sounds really bad or really old, and then just run with that clip. And likewise with, the Democrats, they'll find one tiny segment of a 3-hour conversation between Donald Trump and Joe Rogan and go see, this is really bad. The difference is nobody watches Joe Biden's speeches unless they're already really politically involved, tens of millions of people watch Joe Rogan. That's the issue. The only thing people see of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris are those clips, because otherwise you would have to sit down and watch a Kamala Harris interview, which is fucking boring. On the other side of things, people, you don't need to have a career in politics to want to sit down and watch a Joe Rogan Donald Trump interview, or I guess podcast episode. So that gets seen outside the context of those little clips.
Well, I guess refuse to factor in for some weird reason is that, yeah, he definitely rambles on. He likes to call it the weave, and even Joe Rogan made fun of him for that a little bit in the process. But like, there is something to be said about a relatively telegenic person who is able to portray himself as, I like to call it honestly dishonest, where like everybody knows he's a bit of a scumbag, but he's your scumbag, and he's able to get that across to a lot of people. And
people who don't understand this, like, think of how much, even in my community, people talk about, God, how am I blanking? Please, God, help me. My brain is on fire, not in the good way. You know, the sleazebag, leftist, populist, Everard Clare. Well, yeah, sure, Everard Clare, but I'm thinking of a guy who probably inspired Everard Clare to an extent. Oh, come on, guys. Huey Long! Idiots. Fucking morons. Took me that long to come up with it, and none of you helped me out with the prompt that I gave you.
I don't think that there
I
is
was thonking.
Really anyone with
Thonk
that
harder.
level of television presence on the Democratic Party front. I think like the most skilled orator in the Democratic Party's ranks in the last couple of decades was obviously Barack Obama, and outside of that, I think like in a lot of instances, purely from an optics point of view, Democrats track as like technocratic, elitist, too serious about everything that they talk about. And there's certainly a lot of that on the Republican Party side as well. And we've seen failed initiatives from establishment Republicans that tried to recreate the Trump phenomenon with the likes of Ron DeSantis, and that was a massive failure. But ultimately, I think this goes beyond podcasts. This is something that I've been talking about quite frequently. I know the podcast thing is like the most, like that's the one that got everyone's attention. But I said this on CNN last night that you can't really podcast your way out of this problem. Like having, there was that one tweet saying like, oh, we just got...
I'm not stealing content, by the way. I'm sorry, Pod Saves. Let me know. Contact me at watchvideo@gmail.com if you want me to take this down. I don't normally do the Twitch thing where I just sit here and watch a video silently. That's more his game, I guess. But I can't interject senselessly. I have to like wait and think and impugn, I guess, selectively.
Have 100 Pod Save Americas, but they all have to look like Hasan. Like that's not how this works.
Oh, you think that one tweet might have been wrong? But the I guess so. I agree with that.
You wouldn't copyright a guy with a sore throat, would you?
Kind of like, I don't know, like just have had this devastating loss to Trump, and everybody's looking for these sort of little explanations that all feel like they just feel silly. Like, oh, we need a Joe Rogan of the left, and even saying like I don't even want to talk about how stupid that is anymore, because even that has become stupid. But I do agree that like people are like, oh well, she should have gone on Rogan. All right, yeah, sure, I think so too.
That would not have changed the outcome of this election.
There's a larger problem to what you're getting at, which is like, why don't we have figures and where like we think they would do great on that show, and why is someone like Joe Rogan now, who was 4 years ago open to Bernie, now suddenly open to Trump? Like that's the deeper.
Well, Joe Rogan is 100% like right-wing captured media. He was bragging the other day, I mean yesterday, about not letting Zelensky on the show. And this guy, he's fully bought into the like Kremlin talking points of like, Ukraine is an enemy of America. They steal our money, yada yada, which is all just factually incorrect. But he's fully like a right wing. He's not a right wing plant because he's been there the whole time. But he understands where the winds have blown. He has always been a disingenuous piece of shit. He was hugely disingenuous on COVID. Remember in COVID, where he was very strict and very specific about making sure the people around him were immunized. They had the vaccines. He always had his place like cleaned really, really, really thoroughly because he was paranoid about the virus. And then he would start a show and play it all off and downplay it because he wanted to be like a manly bro, like a manly man, like, whatever, who cares, He's always been like a huge piece of shit like that, not necessarily in a right-leaning way, but just like in a self-serving way. And it is now more self-serving to be like right-wing partisan, you know? I think Kyle Kulinski said he's now more like he's not a comedian anymore. He's just a right-wing partisan. He's more like what do you say, Rush Limbaugh than he is George Carlin, and that's so f***ing true. Kyle totally on about it.
Problem, like you look at like successful Democratic messengers or progressive messengers over the last like decades, and you think, all right, well, Bill Clinton obviously was successful and he like ran against the Democratic Party in some way. Barack Obama did the same thing. Bernie does the same thing. AOC does the same thing. I'm not talking about on policy.
You don't mean it like also in the same direction of running against?
No, but running against the establishment in some way. And just saying, and the reason I connect them is because they all did something which is demonstrated that they were not part of the Democratic establishment, both like on policy and rhetorically, right? Like that's what they all did. And I'm just wondering like what, like the one place where like I know you like find, you know, there's a place where there's like kind of an alignment of like the Seth Moulton critique of the Democratic Party and the lefty critique of the Democratic Party, which is just like, it's fucking annoying and like kind of, I don't know, like pedantic in some way.
It's an incorrect interpretation, an incorrect autopsy to look back at a thing that the Democratic Party did not do at all and then say it's actually that reason. It's not anything that we did so far. It's not that we tack to the right over and over again, despite people like myself and many others saying like, don't do this. You're going to hemorrhage the base. You're going to hemorrhage the base of support. You are going to cut away at your turnout. You're going to cut across many different constituencies that you rely on to create an effective coalition. And it's a very dangerous gamble to assume that you can decouple a lot of these people in the suburbs, a lot of like white women specifically, away from the Republican Party and vote for you instead. I know that they're high propensity voters, but it doesn't matter. There's still plenty of low propensity voters that you have to rely on to win. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party did. They hyper-focused on these key constituencies, despite the fact that polls were seemingly deadlocked after $30 million of ad spend in key...
What's that Schiff quote? For every such and such we lose in Appalachia, in West Virginia, we'll pick up 2 such and suches. In Pennsylvania. Was it Schumer? Yeah, Schumer, not Schiff. Yeah, for every like, I don't know, working class populist we lose in West Virginia, we'll gain 2 like moderate former Republicans in Pennsylvania. You know? Statements dreamed up by the utterly deranged.
Key suburbs, right? Like it showed, at least I said this time and time again, it showed someone from the outside looking in that the message was not working. And you can have the best ground game possible.
Here's a Schumer clip. Yeah, fill me with rage.
This is the second point, for every blue-collar Democrat we will lose in Western PA, we will pick up 2, 3 moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And you can repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin.
It's just like, yeah, play this on loop forever. This is how you break me, okay? When they detain us in the, you know, Viet Cong POW camps and try to get us to divulge American secret. Like it's just play this clip on loop. I'll tell you anything you need to know. Why the fuck are you okay with losing blue collar Democrat? Yeah, no, like the opening premise is psychotic as well. The idea like, yeah, I have a strategy. It begins with us losing the working class, like the 99%. But don't worry, we'll moderate our views enough that we pick up former Republicans. Comes across as very elitist. Yeah, and it's Senator Schumer, so it is. It absolutely is. Because Senator Schumer belongs to the exact same economic and social class as any Republican senator, as Donald Trump, as any of those people. There is no that he agrees with them on a lot. He shares their company. He just occupies a different political position. That's it.
can have, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country door knocking. But if the top down message...
Schumer gets less heat than Pelosi's argument. Schumer's 100% worse than Pelosi because at least she's pragmatically minded when the chips come down. Like Pelosi has, for everything that's wrong with her, and there's a lot wrong with her, at points demonstrated like a sincere desire to win and a dedicated, almost like cutthroat attitude towards getting it done, which I respect.
That you're communicating is not resonating with people, then you're not going to be able to win an election. You're not going to have the effective turnout necessary to win this election. And that is precisely what happened. Now, does that mean that Trump's messaging was good? Of course not. It wasn't. It was actually pretty bad. And I would even go so far as to say the anti-trans ads were actually a distraction and not good. It was only effective in the DC bubble, I think, and the consultant bubble and the media class that saw those ads and were like, oh my God, this is an incredible ad. Like, they really ruined Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris had a silly answer to an ACLU questionnaire, okay? That just shows that she is not the most experienced politician. This was all the way back in, I believe, 2020, right? She literally had to drop out of the primary anyway at that time. That's one thing, okay? But that should not be a campaign killer. If you personally think that that's a campaign killer, then your campaign is weak. This message across the board should never be able to end a single campaign. Then Teflon Don is real.
One of the compelling explanations that I've heard about why things went down the way they did is that because Joe Biden waited so late to drop out and there wasn't a primary, Kamala Harris never had a chance to really aggressively define herself on a new set of principles. And by not talking about trans issues or any of the social issues, by instead focusing like deliberately not ever mentioning them, all people had in their mind was like an amalgam of her doing and saying nothing under Joe Biden, making her effectively like an avatar of his, and also of the 2020 primary. Even if she had disingenuously shifted right since the 2020 primary, the fact that she had barely any time at all to get her positions, run about, definitely hurt her. I mean, the fact that Joe Biden ran again at all was like the death knell. That was like the funereal bell ringing. Donald Trump won the election as soon as he entered himself into the 2024 race. Maybe some insane shit could have happened to have changed the route, the path at that point, but by that point I feel like we were pretty locked in.
I mean, the man had the grab him by the pussy tape come out as the October surprise in 2016, and he still won. And since then, there's been a litany of different controversies, including but not limited to straight up undermining American democracy by doing January 6th. And yet people are still
liberal
voting for him. And one must ask the question, why? And I think overall, the same exact problems that persisted in 2016 when the economy was seemingly very good, right? Especially as opposed to like the post-COVID economy and its recovery. People were still very frustrated with what was going on. The notion that in the wealthiest nation on earth, we have 600,000 people sleeping outside every night. The idea that we have the concept of medical bankruptcy is an insane.
Holding to my position, by the way, that these two issues might contribute to the Democrats' loss more than anything. Everyone knows Democrats are responsible for our major cities because major cities tend to be left-leaning and thereby they vote Democrats. And all of our major cities are crumbling and decaying. Filthy, horrible, more and more homeless people every single year. And yeah, with regards to the medical bankruptcies, Democrats aren't even offering any real change when it comes to that. At least Republicans have the benefit of like gesturing at some greater economy or whatever. Donald Trump, who has no plan for healthcare apart from making sure you die for lack of it, he gestures at some change. Whereas with the Democrats, you're getting effectively the same thing. Sure, you get like a Medicaid or Medicare, like lowered cost of drug negotiation that takes effect 2 years after it was set for some reason that Trump will take credit for. But altogether, yeah, like it's a status quo thing. As always, it's a status quo thing. And yeah, the fact that our cities are filthy does not make the Democrats look good. You go to literally any other city, just any other city in the developed world. And I mean that. You can go anywhere. Is Paris filthy? Yeah, but at least it's interesting. as opposed to basically every American city, which is filthy and boring and ugly. Paris is filthy and interesting. Pretty, like, big win on that one. If you might find filthy cities elsewhere, but you will not find ones with as much homelessness. And what's more, they tend to have more shit to do in them. You can go anywhere, okay? You can go to Italy. You can go to Spain. You can go to Hungary, okay? You can go anywhere. You go to Budapest, okay? If you're going to like any city in the West that is decently large, you will have a better time than just exploring an American city, with the exceptions of New York and possibly Chicago. Thank you.
Phenomena that doesn't exist in any other OECD nation. Like the fact that 40% of the American public don't, or 60% of the American public doesn't have $400 in emergency spending. Like
maybe DC. No, DC is filthy. DC is filthy and has a huge homelessness issue. What are you guys talking? No. I'm not engaging on this with you. Okay.
These are all very real economic anxieties. I'm using that term specifically because, you know, it's one thing that people like to hyper focus on, that creates volatility, that creates instability, and it creates a
DC is a lot cleaner than New York City. Are you crazy? I wasn't comparing it to New York City, you troglodyte. I was comparing it to the broader standard, the norm around the world. Go to Tokyo and then come back to any American city and talk to me about cleanliness. It is insane what we put up with here. You just said New York City was good. I said New York City was interesting, like a real city.
A base of angry people, and if the Democratic Party is not addressing that anger and addressing their material problems and earnestly telling them, like, we're going to fix that shit, okay, and the other side is looking at that anger and saying, we're going to channel your anger, you have every right to be angry, and you know who you should be angry at?
I didn't care for Tokyo, but then I just randomly use Google Maps to street view a random street and it's spotless. Insane, the comparison. Yeah, genuinely, yeah. It's like part of it is horrendous democratic governance. Part of it is the fact that we spend 110% of every city's budget on police. Part of it is the fact that we have literally no care for walkability, so our cities are all like trash havens and streets and highways and so on and so forth. Part of it's a cultural thing. We're over in Tokyo, if you litter, like in public, everyone turns towards you and they stare at you until you commit ritualistic Sudoku. And in America, you can toss McDonald's wrappers out the side window or whatever, and no one gives a shit, and you'll never get punished for it no matter what. No cop will ever harass you for littering. It doesn't matter. Sudoku? He said Sudoku instead of seppuku. What a quirky mistake. Bet he's the first guy to do that.
Those who have less than you. You know who you should be angry at? The working poor, the homeless people that are doing crimes left and right, black and brown people, undocumented migrants that are doing incredible amounts of crimes. They're killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, and trans people. And the Democratic Party only cares about those people and they don't care about you. And that message resonates with a base of support, not because they are intrinsically evil. That message resonates with a base of support because they're angry, and one of the two major parties is not even remotely interested in addressing that anger and trying to tell them what the solution to that anger actually is and what the real problem is.
But my stats, but my Pell Grants, but my charts that you need a bachelor's degree in statistics to understand that say that actually things are doing better. You mean politics means addressing people's feelings? You mean popularity? Man, the way Republicans act, they treat politics like it's just a popularity contest. Actual lines that I hear from liberals, by the way. I'm glad that Hasan is going on there doing this. Pod Save is a radlib bastion, or at least it has been historically. It seems like it's kind of been the focal point of the post-election discourse, where people go to, like the past two episodes, we're getting a distinct set of perspectives. If Hasan coming on here, maybe some consultant listens to this, clearly they went on it, so it's listened to by the kinds of people who then go on to advise Democratic campaigns. It's rough, man. We need to get the message out there.
So I want to break that into kind of how we the Democratic brand, how we message and all, but also on the policy front. So Joe Biden wins. He tries to kind of build consensus with
Thanks
Bernie.
for the
He
input,
brings in
Benjamin.
AOC. He goes to the left on antitrust. He does the Inflation Reduction Act. He does a post-COVID relief bill. He cancels as much debt as he can legally, even though the court is trying to stop him. Like before the last year, like what my view of this is Joe Biden, this consensus Democrat, right? Actually to the right of the consensus for most of his career, kind of somebody that had to be kind of pulled to where the party was going, did something extraordinary, which is he adapted, he changed, he governed in a much more progressive way than I think probably than I expected. I hope that you expected.
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems as though whether it's because people didn't feel it or people didn't believe it, or the way Democrats talk about policy is ineffective, like it didn't seem to matter in terms of how people viewed like the Democratic response to the economy, right? They were so angry about inflation. They were angry about a bunch of other issues, and it really didn't matter what Joe Biden said or what Kamala Harris said. They were held responsible. And I'm just wondering how you explain that, right? Like, it seems as though Joe Biden tried to listen to this exact critique, and it didn't matter.
So yes and no.
I mean, again, part of this is like you're doomed from the start kind of deal, because Joe Biden was so incapable of expressing his positions that he famously lost the debate to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, like, yeah, low bar. It's people don't understand. Like, if you are trying to make a case for your politic, for your candidacy in an era of populist anger, you need to be really aggressive in labeling an enemy. And the Democrats don't like it when you go after the corporations directly, because they provide money to the Democratic Party. But the Democrats don't even make an enemy of the Republicans. They exceptionalize Donald Trump by treating the Republican Party as something that's just been captivated by Trump, and Trump is this like angry idiot. No. The Republican Party and Trump are as one, a unified front. Trump is just the ego man at the front. In reality, all of them are fully committed to the dismantling of our institutions. Yeah, they don't treat it as like an endemic issue. They don't want to call out Republicans. Why not? Blame someone. Things are going wrong. People want someone to blame. And here's the nice part, Republicans understand this, and they've been blaming all kinds of people, immigrants, trans people. They have to lie to do so. If you blame Republicans for things going wrong, you'd be right. A lot of the problems that we've been suffering from, a lot of the worsening social trends, are a direct consequence of like laissez-faire neoconservative deregulation under Reagan. Now, you don't have to get that specific and wordy about it, but you can certainly gesture at at the very least, you can talk about it. You can talk about Republicans, their obsession with deregulation, our failing infrastructure, our social systems. You can talk about these things. But Kamala Harris didn't want to make an enemy of Republicans. In fact, she was bragging about wanting to be more conciliatory towards them than Joe Biden was. It's pathetic. Who's going to get fired up at that? Who in God's green earth is going to wake up angry at their life and their surroundings and then get motivated to vote for somebody who's saying that they're not even that against their opponent? Ridiculous.
Well, I do agree. There are plenty of things that Joe Biden did, like beefing up the NLRB and letting the FTC rain hell upon these monopolies.
Which, again, no one talks about, so it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter if you do something. It only matters if you're able to make an effective campaign out of something, which you have to be pretty online to be focusing on, like Lena Khan, and all the good shit that she's done. You have to be pretty engaged.
There's two issues there, though. One is, I think, something that you will agree with as well, that the Democrats don't campaign year round in the same way that Republicans do on key issues. And they do have a massive communication problem. That could potentially be solved by having a more robust ecosystem and more collaboration with even the likes of yourself and maybe even someone like myself as well. And they need to always be on. They need to always be counter-messaging against the anti-immigration sentiment. I went back and looked at my commentary from February of 2021 when the story of the Customs and Border Patrol Haitian migrants getting whipped by horseback Customs and Border Patrol people.
I remember.
Officers was in the news, and I remember talking about how the Republicans are going to keep hitting the immigrants are doing crime note over and over again because that's the one thing that they have, and it's built around a complete falsehood that undocumented migrants are responsible for incredible amounts of crime. It's not correct. There is no data to suggest this. The data actually shows the exact opposite. Undocumented migrants are your neighbors. They contribute to the economy in very meaningful ways, and they very rarely take anything in return. Why is the Democratic Party not pushing this counter narrative? And they never did. Instead of pushing that counter narrative, which is based in truth, and talk about how undocumented migrants are responsible for less crime per capita than natural born U.S. citizens are, or that fentanyl being trafficked across the U.S. borders are actually not coming in the knapsack of a otherwise law-abiding abuela, but instead it's coming from regular points of entry trafficked by American citizens. 90% of the people that are being apprehended for chemical compounds necessary for fentanyl or direct drugs that they're trafficking across the border are American citizens. Like,
sure.
This does not track with the narrative that people believe.
Yeah, Democrats just flat up gave up on all of that. They didn't. Not only did they not aggressively push for these points, they didn't even mention it. They took the opposite points. They kowtowed to the narrative. They started talking about how, they've reduced the number of crossings and how they are going to crack down on fentanyl making its way through the country, and they're going to be like the security. The border bill that they try to get passed as a bipartisan consensus, which Trump then shot down because he wanted to campaign on the issue. It ended up not even mattering because, like, anyone who's concerned about immigration enough that they'd vote for it is going to vote for Republicans because they're the most aggressively anti-immigrant. No one's voting for 99% Hitler if the thing they like about the thing they're looking for in the candidate is anti-Semitism. They're going to vote for the 100% Hitler.
Because the narrative is dominated by the right on this issue. They should have been counter-messaging against that, and they should have been putting bills forward in defense of the moves that, for example, Governor Greg Abbott was engaging in Ron DeSantis. I said this even back then.
And they should have been way the more aggressive in attacking Republicans across the aisle on this too. Like, accuse Republicans of being pro-fentanyl abuse because they shut down clinics and they defund aid organizations, and because they are redirecting people's attention away from the actual culprits. Go after everything. Go find of citizens that have been arrested for trafficking fentanyl, of police departments who have been broken up or have been investigated for collaborating to allow fentanyl to come through the border or to get cuts from the cartel or whatever else. Like, make an issue of all of it. Paint a narrative of, I would say, largely correct narrative, by the way, of Republicans actively undermining the country at every end because they know that if the government fails the people, they'll vote in the privateers. They'll vote in the people who come in and deregulate everything and give it to the corporations. Accuse Republicans of being maliciously, at best, incompetent and at worst, obstructionist in an effort to worsen people's lives so they can campaign on the issue. But they don't wanna. Yeah. Democrats don't propose bills unless they know they can get them through, which is insane. Republicans make bills. Look at Nancy Mace's bill, written in crayon. In all federal buildings, someone should feel your dick and balls or pussy and then tell you what bathroom to use. Signed, Nancy Mace. They'll put that through. They'll put anything through. They don't care. If Republicans shut down a good bill, run on it, campaign on it, do this every single day. Is it tiring? That's what you're paid for. You signed up for it. You were not conscripted into the Senate or House of Representatives. You ran for it.
Then that this is actually a fantastic opportunity for the federal government to show that there is a more tolerant approach, that one, they should have immediately pursued Governor Greg Abbott legally and arrested him for human trafficking and tried to prosecute.
Unfortunately, Merrick Garland is literally the biggest pussy on earth, so he didn't do anything because he sucks.
him for human trafficking. I don't care if it's a constitutional crisis or not. All of this stuff was insanely messed up, and the federal government dropped the ball. I think the Biden administration dropped the ball by not adding additional funds immediately, sending additional funds immediately to places like Chicago and New York, and to figure out a better way to transition a lot of these people and integrate them into the American labor force.
Also, like, I really do think a narrative should have been painted where you juxtapose an earnest, hardworking, undocumented family with someone who really doesn't deserve American citizenship, a Republican politician. You could go so hard with this. Who's really more American? You know, Jose, who lives in South Los Angeles and has been for 16 years, who works tirelessly day in and day out to provide for his family, who has a giant-ass American flag, you know, hanging from the wall of the apartment that he and his family of 4 lives in, you know, who works tirelessly to provide for his community and for his family, versus this, like, you know, fat, bloviating, ass Republican politician in the area who does nothing to help his constituents and exists, it subsides entirely off of like kickbacks and local corruption. Who would you rather have as your neighbor? You know, if they ran aggressively on that and had been for years and years and years and years. Nationalism and patriotism are cringe, though. Yeah, and stay out of government. Sorry, that's how you win. Also, I'm okay with patriotism as long as it's being framed in the context of the right values. To me, an American is someone who lives here. American in spirit. I'm not talking about legality here, you know? But I've been saying this my whole life. I grew up around a ton of undocumented people. I grew up in LA. The people who were doing landscaping in Beverly Hills with the like 23-year-old white pickup trucks, the Fords, they're not documented. No one asks for their papers. We know what the deal is. But those were the hardest working motherfuckers out there. Every guy I went to high school with wanted to grow up to become a DJ. Then I go look outside and some, like, you know, some 4'9" guy who could probably deadlift me, you know, reps 100 times, has been out there landscaping since 6:15 in the morning. And he's got an American flag in his pickup truck. He works harder than I ever will, even if I didn't become a live streamer.
And instead, they just got stuck in this like legal limbo for no reason.
So why is it that, okay, so Republicans say they sort of lay all these problems at the feet of undocumented immigrants. They say they're responsible for crime.
Yeah.
No, they're not. But there are obviously undocumented people. They're people, and some are committing terrible crimes, which they then exploit. But for the most part, these are people that not only are committing crimes at a low rate, but actually are unable to go to the police when they're victims of crime.
Yep.
Whether that's a domestic violence, they can't go to the police, or whether that's just sort of the quotidian mayhem of living in America, or a boss taking advantage of you. They can't go to the police, right?
Yeah.
Then they say, oh, well, they don't pay taxes. Actually, that's not true. They pay into Medicare, they pay into Social Security, and they don't get the benefits of it back. And then they say, well, they're driving up.
Have you heard any of this from a Democratic politician over the last 4 years? I remember hearing it from 2016 to 2021. Have you heard any of this from a Democratic politician over the last 4 years?
The cost of housing. I do not believe that undocumented people are the reason a house costs $450,000 where it used to cost $350,000.
Yeah, I didn't realize they were executives at BlackRock. The Guatemalan migrants are mass purchasing houses and making sure that everyone's a permanent renter.
Yeah, I love the idea that undocumented migrants are the reason why housing costs are surging in like California, leaving aside the fact that Texas has an enormous number of undocumented immigrants and their housing prices have been holding steady and in some areas actually dropping. Like what? Oh, so it's not them.
That's the point, though. But it's not a trans person that's your landlord. It's not an undocumented immigrant that's your landlord that's raising the cost of rent. It's not, your manager is not an undocumented immigrant.
There are two big problems, though. One is there are a lot of people saying this, and
not the Democratic politicians, and not running on it. They have to say it as loud and as proud as the Republicans are transphobic and such and such. They have to make it their mission to say this day in and day out all the time, over and over again. That has to be their number one job.
Doesn't break through because there is this right-wing media system that puts out this one story. And the second problem is, like, Democrats really don't have trust on this issue with the people that they're trying to persuade to see it are.
Yeah, but both of these problems are caused by the Democrats, right? The reason it can't pierce the media bubble is because they're not shouting loud enough. And the reason why Democrats aren't thought as trustworthy is because they literally pivoted. Back during Donald Trump's first term, they were aggressively pro-immigrant, pro-DACA, such and such. Then, as soon as Joe Biden stepped in, they dropped all of that and opened up a void for Republicans to fill with their own narrative. They are untrustworthy. Republicans are relatively trustworthy in immigration. I know exactly where they stand in immigration. They f***ing hate immigrants. Okay, I believe them. Like that, they've sold me on the consistency of their message. Democrats, not so much.
Way, which I think goes to the point you made before, right? Which is, why is it that Donald Trump can meander around the country rambling, committing what in any other era would be, if not like campaign ending, like campaign harming, ridiculous statements, gaffes, sure, that he can basically be in like a strategic mess, but Kamala Harris has to hit every point exactly right. She
doesn't. That's the thing. It's like you're holding yourself to a false expectation. She doesn't have to hit every point entirely right. She's on the wrong side of the paradigm. It's not about her hitting the points right. Like Kamala Harris has entered into a battle of the bands rock and roll competition, and she showed up with no microphone and a violin. People are here to see rock and roll. She can hit, oh, why are people booing her? She's, played almost perfectly. Yeah, no one's here for violin. And they can't hear her. It's not an electric violin. It's acoustic. The room isn't meant to pick this up. She has a whole set of unused speakers behind her that are just sitting there. Like she's playing the wrong game entirely. You bring a chessboard and you set up, the pieces, and then Kamala Harris shows up and she starts playing checkers and loses. And she's like, well, what the f***? I played a perfect game of checkers. She's like stacked two kings on top of each other on the other side of the board, like she's like balanced them.
She says the wrong thing on The View, or there's a bad interview from 2020. Those things can be campaign ending. And I think, to your point, it goes to something deeper, a kind of a lack of a core vision or motivating mission for the current Democratic Party.
Yeah, something that is an understandable, easy to communicate, simple policy that you can put your campaign around. So we agree on the messaging front a little bit, at least, or the asymmetry of how much right-wing media dominates the ecosystem, the media ecosystem in general, all the way from independent outlets down to traditional media, where, as far as I understand it, 73% now, I think, of all news watchers are watching Fox News. 73%.
Cool.
That's an insane percentage.
And again, by the way, why would you not? I have seen countless news clips from ABC, MSNBC, CNN, on and off stream. They are boring. You go there only for information. I've gone there only for information. If something's happening, oh, okay, here. Or maybe like a public official or somebody is getting an interview. Like, okay, well, I'll hear them talk then at the platform they're speaking at. Fox News has a cohesive message that runs. It's not just about like the entertainment factor. They've structured their entire news delivery game around not just keeping you hooked, but presenting like a cohesive platform. On CNN, like they've got any moron on there. One of the big shows, MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, who bent the knee to Trump the moment he got there. They don't have a cohesive platform at all.
An insane number, right? So outside of that, though, I think here is the disagreement that we will have. That while Joe Biden did a bunch of stuff that I agree was positive, it was simply not enough. And that was something that I was always very critical on as well. If you see a homeless person and you chuck them 2 pennies and they're sitting on the corner of the street, like, yeah, technically their material wealth improved by a percentage, a decent percentage, but he's still going to be mad at you because you just gave him 2 pennies. Why doesn't the homeless person understand that their situation is much better? That is not an effective way to communicate to Americans that, like, no, you don't understand. Inflation is actually under control, that the economy is rebounding, even if it's objective truth. Because
the idea of running on the premise of like, we will make it easier to buy a home because we'll kick you like, what was it, 10, 20,000? When that is like 1% of the cost of a home in a bunch of blue states. Say 25K? Yeah. Like 1 to 2% the cost of a home. You know? And a tax credit, no less, because they love their tax credits. It's crazy. Like, sorry, I thought the average property value in my neighborhood was $1.24 million, but having that knocked down to $1.215 million is really going to make the difference.
They, like most Americans, don't understand what inflation is, and they don't understand that prices are not going to go down in that circumstance. And besides that, and I factor this is not just the vibe session communications, but I'm also talking about specifically like even the IRA or many of these other like parts of the legislative agenda that Biden.
Never forget, Republicans did more stimulus money than Dems. It's deeply that. Yep, I remember that. And Donald Trump delayed the checks so he could sign them. Donald J. Trump, to all of the checks going out, the $2,000 checks. And then once the Democrats came in, not only did they not Joe Biden didn't do that, but also they started arguing about how getting an extra 600 was like the initial promise to get the 2,600 because it was 600 plus the previous 2,000. So actually getting 600 would be a fulfillment of that promise, even though no one was happy with it.
Put forth that was more progressive than I expected, from more progressive than even the Obama administration in many respects.
Wasn't it 1,400 plus 600? I'm gonna not lie to you. I don't remember the exact values. I only remember the conflict. Also, my brain is currently basting in gravy.
One, they didn't do a good job of communicating any of those victories, in my opinion. They did not. They did not actually like go to the media regularly to show these victories and to showboat and gloat a little bit. Two, a lot of that was also held up in gridlock because we didn't whip votes well enough within our
1,400 initially, it was 1,400 initially, then the 600, and that created the 2,000. Yeah, Democrats were like, we're going to give you 2,000, but then they just gave the 600 to add on top of the 1,400 that was initial. So then they were like, oh, that's 2,000. We're running on giving you 2,000, but by that we mean we're going to give you, was it 600 initially? I don't remember.
Own party, and I think that there was a lot of punishments that should have been dished out to the likes of Joe Manchin and the likes of Kyrsten Sinema, rather than offering a Green senator an opportunity to be a
Okay, yeah, the first one was the 600 that was signed by Donald Trump, and then the 1,400 was the one by the Democrats. There we go. Okay, now I remember. Thank you. And I don't even remember the first one. 1,200 per income tax. I don't remember that.
Prominent fixture of the Democratic Party. I think that a lot more punishments should have been issued towards these people that use the moment in the spotlight to specifically play the role of a rotating villain in the Democratic Party, which has happened time and time again, all the way from Joe Lieberman to the Maggie Hassans of the world, the Kyrsten Sinemas, the Joe Manchins of the world, and the problem solvers caucuses within Congress in general. These guys need to get whipped into shape.
I just like I wish I believed that. I just wish I believed that. Like
but think about it.
But I just like I don't know how much more you could have gotten out of Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. Like Joe Manchin basically was telegraphing the whole time, like I'll walk away. And Joe Biden kept him in the tent. That got judges through. That got the Inflation Reduction Act through. Like I do not believe
But it didn't matter. It ended up not mattering because he lost the presidency. You know? Like it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter. Then, like, I'm glad the Inflation Reduction Act went through, but this is like the fundamental issue, right? It's that it seems like why doesn't this happen within the Republican Party? Like the last time this really happened within the Republican Party was with John McCain shut down Donald Trump's attempt to remove the Affordable Care Act. And John McCain was reviled by the Republicans after that because he broke with the Republicans' actual message. Like treason will not be tolerated. Meanwhile, with the Democrats, it's like, no, we have to coddle all of these, fake Democrats, all these, dinos, basically, Why is it that the Republicans command such loyalty? Why is it that Donald Trump was able to break the entire party, get them all behind him, even the people he directly insulted? Whereas the Democrats, like, why do they not revile the people within their party who break rank? Why is our coalition more fractious? Why?
I think we agree on a lot. I just don't believe that there is a version of the Joe Biden presidency that could have been more successful on legislative policy. I don't see that.
You're not going to appreciate what I'm about to say then.
Hit me.
Use the IRS and also the SEC and maybe even the FTC to investigate as to why Joe Manchin's brother owns a coal mine and whether there's a conflict of interest there. Investigate why Joe Manchin's daughter is selling pharmaceutical products to the state of West Virginia when Joe Manchin is directly at odds with any sort of bill that passes that would lower the cost of pharmaceuticals.
So you want the president to politicize these agencies?
Yes,
they're already politicized. And the mythology that they haven't been is why the Democrats are losing right now. There is no. Do you think they'll be politicized under Republicans? Yes, they were already politicized then. The institution is already politicized.
Use them to go after people.
Because you want to know why?
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Because they're doing it at the behest of not only the American people, their interests.
People will be like, yeah, I'm an FDR liberal. What? Bully and like demand feasance from people in my party? That's like Hitler shit. Do you know what FDR did? Are you aware of what FDR had to do to get the kind of public mandate he had? People hated him.
But they're also, and this is probably...
Also, what's the consequence of politicizing the president's like regulatory and administrative powers? When the Republicans take over, they're going to do it? Where'd that line of thinking get us? Well, thank goodness. I mean, Joe Biden, or, then Kamala Harris lost the election, but thankfully, because he was, abstinent in this use of power, the Republicans will be very, very moderate in their use of these organizations.
Going to frustrate everyone in this audience. But here's the thing that I get very frustrated about.
Wide range of listeners across a broad ideological spectrum.
Here's what really frustrates me.
What frustrates you?
The way the Democratic Party operates. They love norms. They love institutions. They love civility. They
Post has gotten kind of hostile over this one. It's very funny, the idea of like when, coal mining magnates and shitty do-nothing senators threaten to ruin the lives of hundreds of millions of people by blocking necessary legislation. It's actually immoral to investigate obvious corruption that they engage in because it would be like mean.
Care about bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship, as though that is something that
some do, some don't.
Yeah, sure. But for the most part, the broad communication coming out of the Democratic Party is that these are the things that they care about. These are the top line issues. We got to protect democracy. We got to preserve our institutions. The problem is the other side doesn't give a shit about that. So I think I want a Democratic Party that fights for me and others who are marginalized, other people that like desperately need help. And I know that the Republican Party is never going to do that. I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, well, at least the Republicans are kind of listening to what I have to say or are, communicating, channeling the anger.
Also, you could like do a really, really, really good job of running on this, right? Like if you were authentically anti-corruption, you could go, wow, what a coincidence, Manchin, big friend of petrol, of oil and gas. Turns out that he's corrupt as shit and his hands in a bunch of, coal mining enterprises. What a coinkydink. Thankfully, corruption like this will no longer be tolerated in our government, which works for the people, by the people. Like, just run with it. If you went after Joe Manchin for being a piece of shit and then didn't go to the media over it and just like let the Republicans fill the void with that narrative, then you'll lose on the narrative. Manchin's daughter raised EpiPen's prices by 1,000. Don't mention that, Benjamin. That's partisanship, to acknowledge that there is an oligarchy in this country where powerful people get away with doing whatever they want. You're telling me the family members of senators get preferential treatment? Are you politicizing politics?
that I feel like I don't care. They're charlatans. They're significantly worse than the Democratic Party. I don't like the Democratic Party for their closeness to the Republican Party. I want them to be a party that actually fights for the working class, for all Americans unconditionally, regardless of ideology. And you can't do that through bipartisanship with an otherwise like hostile entity that is the Republican Party. And I think there is a lot of hypocrisy there, and and hypocrisy that people can see. Hypocrisy is the easiest thing that they can understand. You can't say that these guys are fascists, these guys are racist for 8 years for wanting to build a wall and then turn around and straight up tell Anderson Cooper in that town hall, well, maybe the wall is a good idea and I want to build it myself. I'm going to be the border czar. I'm going to be the border party. You can't do that. Americans look at that and go, so you're admitting that you were just lying for the past 8 years.
Well, it's like, again, though, it's like, I think actually, like you look at somebody like Dan Osborne, right, who ran so far ahead of the Democratic Party, ran as this economic populist, but one of the things he had to do to get there was...
No drama, no stunlock, but have you heard about the Destiny Fuentes sex tapes? Brother, who do you think was holding the camera? I'll say no more.
Kind of be tough on immigration. And actually, like, I think part of it goes back to, like, if people felt like they knew, like, in their bones, like Bernie Sanders being to me like the signal example, like, you know what Bernie's about. You know what he's for. You know what motivates him. You know what he cares about. Same thing for Trump. You know when there are issues he doesn't give a fuck about, and there's issues
I think it's really telling that the only thing this guy has offered substantial pushback on, though he didn't actually like substantiate it, was the idea of using the federal government to go after like the corruption of people who are obstructing your agenda, you know? Like, but he didn't want to talk about it, you know? Like, I don't know. I think that just makes people very uncomfortable to think about. But then, like, you really have to think about, like, why? That's literally their job. The only reason they don't investigate corruption like that is because there are implicit orders from the higher up to not do that. Do you think those people are stupid? These regulatory agencies, they know how the game is played to the extent that they're not already captured by the agencies that they're trying to regulate or by the industries they're trying to regulate. They're fully aware of the fact that if one of these guys was like, just for fun, we're going to investigate the relatives of a senator. Yep, a sitting senator. Yep, he's been there for a long time, got a lot of friends. Yep, they're very wealthy. All right, let's do it. Like, yeah, they're not stupid. You would need the mandate of a president to go after something like that big. You know? Otherwise, it just gets shut down. Of course it gets shut down.
He really, really cares about. Immigration is one, trade, right? Like, you know, the things that like that have been anti-crime, whatever, that there are things that have been in Donald Trump's like kind of brain slowly losing plasticity that are like kind of solid in there.
Me too.
And for Bernie, you know, like we know why he's in politics, and that gives a politician the space to kind of challenge orthodoxies in the party or kind of run counter to it to signal to the people you need to signal to. Now, like, you know, you say, oh, you can't call them fascist and then also work with them. Like, yeah, but at the same time, Joe, like, again, like,
senators get prosecuted all the time. Menendez senators get prosecuted all the time brings up like not only an incredibly rare example of a senator getting prosecuted, but also one in which the corruption that he engaged in was so obvious and so straightforward. Like the one time. Also, that was like broad corruption, not like in a specific or politically targeted way. That was literally like gold bars hidden behind the wall. I mean, that like that he worked for that prosecution.
It's like, I just don't know what to do with this nuance. Joe Biden, like, I am glad Joe Biden did the Inflation Reduction Act and an infrastructure bill and a gun bill.
No one cares.
And the CHIPS Act.
No one cares.
And a bunch of other stuff. I'm glad he was able to do all of those things. I'm glad that he was able to use his kind of like moderate brand, whatever, to kind of bring people in and get some stuff done. Like,
but he didn't. Like, he didn't. That you're comparing this against the false like juxtaposition where he was more radically populist and no one wanted to work with him, you know?
I don't think the country is better off if he didn't do those things. So, like, you describe it as hypocrisy. Like, it's compromise. Like, politics requires compromise.
No, wait, again, like the idea that the only reason the infrastructure bill or the Inflation Reduction Act happened was because of his, mollycoddling and weakness and inability to form partisan lines. Like, I flatly don't think that's true. And if you want an example of what partisanship can get you, look what the Trump administration's about to get away with. The CHIPS Act actually got cut by 2/3 in order to meet Republican demands. Yeah, like, we get nothing, and the nothing we get is cut down. Republicans don't have to compromise, and they win. Why is that?
The Republican Party rarely ever compromises.
Yeah.
They're uncompromising. You only have to beat them.
But that's not true, though, right? Like, I agree with that on Trump, but that's just not true. Like, they did compromise, right? There are plenty of people on the Republican side that were furious at Republican senators for going along with some of these Biden bills, right? Like, those are people that did compromise.
Yeah, there is a.
But again, well, not really. No. What fury? What real electoral consequences are there to that? Like, what has happened? What outcome has there been? They got primaried? Okay, they got primaried by people who are more ideologically aligned. Yeah, Liz Cheney voted 99% with Trump. Like, it doesn't, the point here is that the Republican Party isn't weakened as an entity, as a platform, by these occasional instances of them working with Democrats, whereas the Democrats are constantly weakening themselves and shooting themselves in the foot and getting nothing done because of their insistence on working with Republicans. And then people say, well, if they didn't work with Republicans, they wouldn't get anything at all. To which my answer is, well, then why are they in a different position than with the Republicans? Like, why is that? Why are the Republicans so strong? Why do we have to accept such weakness? Why is the system set up in such a way that we have to keep placating like this? Yeah, the GOP threw out their speaker. They're incredibly militant in reinforcing the party doctrine. Do Democrats do this? No, there's no drive in them. There's no fight. There's no fire in their heart.
A million examples, however, of Republicans that are obstructionists that I'm sure you also love presenting, that go back to their town halls and lie about all the money that they brought back home from the bills that they voted against. So ultimately, we now know that political polarization is set in a way that never really existed in American history until the last couple of decades, right? I think that parties originally were more geopolitically focused on their immediate needs, like statewide needs. So you saw this dramatic shift, and now the Republican Party is...
Republicans live in terror of contradicting Donald Trump. They are worried about them running afoul or incurring his ire. I want a Democratic Party where a progressive populist president incurs that kind of fear in the politicians underneath him. I want Democratic House members and senators to adjust their rhetoric in order to not alienate themselves in the eyes of the hyper-popular leader.
Especially with Mitch McConnell under the Obama administration, showcased that permanent obstructionism is not punishable, and that gridlock is always considered the administrative party's problem. If there's any sort of gridlock, it's the fault of the leadership, and Americans hate gridlock. Yeah, that's kind of the reason why I was talking about Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, because there was a massive moment where they actually ended up protecting the Republican Party because they were never going to vote for these bills anyway, and now the entire conversation was about madness within the Democratic Party's caucuses, they can't get their ducks in a row, right? That was genuinely frustrating to me, because it's if you had whipped your votes immediately, then you could showcase that the Republican Party is standing in the way of progress. But that's just that is legislative minutia. What is more important to talk about is broad, sweeping legislative changes or a agenda.
Yeah, speaking of just getting this from Blue Sky Now, in terms of the disposition of the Democratic leadership.
But these values, these norms, these ideas, these institutions have to hold. And we recognize that as House Democrats will now play a significant role in that regard. And, the thing I've always appreciated about Liz, and
Liz
the
Cheney.
thing, a lot of us who spend time in that, we love the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives is the institution, of course, that the framers decided would be the closest.
After extensive polling indicating that association with Liz Cheney did nothing but a disservice to Kamala Harris's winning chances, here we have one of the most powerful people in the Democratic Party sitting here in a dimly lit room, buzzing audio on C-SPAN, saying like, you know, well, here we are. Like, this is the Democratic leadership, talking about what the founding fathers would have wanted while sitting with somebody for whom like acceptance of is representative of the overall decline of your party. Also, he's wearing dress sneakers, which I find sickening. It's repugnant. It really, really is.
That might even come across as bold and radical in the interest of the American working class. Joe Biden said he wanted to do the public option.
Yeah, Republicans threw out their House Speaker over like basically nothing. Democrats will keep all of their leadership, even as they lose the trifecta. Like, that's the difference, man.
Everybody knew that wasn't real. He never talked about it after. He used the public option. He slotted that in the primaries when the party was primed to the Bernie left, and everyone was like, you know, trying to communicate their own populist version of what Bernie was doing, and you know, Joe Biden won the primaries and effectively tabled the discussion about healthcare. This is still a major problem, regardless. Like, yes, negotiating pharmaceutical prices and ensuring that insulin prices are capped at $35, which is now going to be looking like a Trump victory when he's in office. It doesn't matter. It's still good for the American people. So that's great. But like, that is good, but that's not enough.
Yeah.
And I think that when you don't do that, when you have this very technocratic, third-way neoliberal approach, but you sprinkle in a little bit of like anti-corporate, anti-billionaire populism that Joe Biden certainly did, it's not, you're a rudderless ship. You're not communicating effectively like what you are about. And when you don't have a North Star that every single person can point to and say, this is what the party is about, your enemies can portray you as whatever they want. And that's why the anti-trans ads are even remotely effective, because you can make the Democratic Party look clownish and inconsistent and even silly and hyper-focused on whatever key issues there are, because one, they rarely ever focus on universality in programs. Everything has to be means tested, which I think is both on the policy front and on the politics front garbage. Focus on universal programs, because that way you can cut across every single group and you can disproportionately target marginalized populations. Black.
This is like the easiest sell in the universe. Everything that we know about politics suggests that across the board proposals are much more popular than means-tested ones. Democrats insist on means testing because they have brain damage. It's literally it. It's politics is about popularity, you idiots. Obviously it is. That's how you win an election, by being popular.
Populations, brown populations, and trans people. These people do not exist in a vacuum. They're not magical, mystical beings that are not experiencing the shocks of the market, or they still have to pay rent. They still need workplace protections. They still need, they still need the cost of medicine to go down, right? So universal programs capture the attention of all Americans, including this majority white, angry population that is finding themselves in the throes of the Republican reactionary movement. And so they need to do that. And if they don't do that, then the subtle populism of the right is always going to be the only game in town, and they're going to be able to present themselves as anti-establishment while they have billionaires parading around all the campaign stops, like Elon Musk trying to do that X logo every time he jumps.
Sigabiz, I don't think that FDR's vision died with FDR. Like, his brand of social democracy continued to like be an icon for the country basically until Reagan, right? Like, obviously, I'm not saying LBJ or JFK were, as good as FDR. They certainly weren't. But he created the norms and standards that were not meaningfully, substantially dismantled until Reagan. So, like, you know, that's kind of history. You're always going to get a bit of ebb and flow, but if you're strong, you can build something that lasts a while. Nah, Nixon? Nixon was not, Nixon wasn't like a deregulatory neocon in the way that, you know, Reagan was. Nixon was way better than Reagan by like a factor of 10, to be honest with you.
Like a child.
God,
I hate Elon Musk.
That is the trick, though, man. They're like, it does speak to like just how far, like, you know, one place where, so if you listen to the Harris campaign's advisors talking to Dan Pfeiffer, I know you did, and you had your problems with it. But one place where they agreed is that, like, hey, like, everyone's saying, oh, this trans ad, like, it actually might not have been their most effective ad. And they were trying to, and what Quentin Funk.
Yeah, all of this really insidious, like, talking about the Harris they them ad as though that was the meaningful, like, that was the thing that motivated most people. When we know for a fact from the exit polls, most of the people who voted for Trump were motivated by stuff like the economy and immigration. So people insisting, like, oh yeah, it was because of that Harris stands for they them ad, like, really strikes to me as an example of manufactured consent, where they're trying to go like, hey, maybe we do have to walk back on the trans support, you know, maybe we do have to dial it down because she was so vulnerable in that issue, even though she never ever talked about trans people at all, not for years now. The one time she was asked about it, she tersely responded with pursed lips that she would follow the law with regards to a trans affirming care. I bet it was that ad.
Said was that, like, they were actually really trying to target it to get at black men, and it looks like maybe that didn't work, right? Like, that's what that sort of, we'll see, like, we're gonna get more data, but like the point that the ad makes is just that, like, Democrats are weird, Democrats are strange,
yeah,
right? And like they use trans people as a cudgel,
yeah, to
do that. But like, to the larger point, you have billionaires, just literally the wealthiest man in the world.
The top seven donors this election cycle all donated to the Republican Party, and they were donating like $100 million, $200 million. Like, it was crazy. How
do you think about the fact that in right-wing media right now, and like right-wing adjacent media, they are managing to be both the party of the wealthiest sort of oligarchs in the world and the kind of traditional moral set trying to impose a specific way of living on people, and anti-establishment kind of rebellious politics?
Because the Democrats are so bad at messaging that Republicans have filled the void, like, entirely. Like, Democrats are so uniquely weak and so uniquely bad at filling the media space with a narrative that Republicans have been allowed to do literally whatever they want with it. Donald Trump engages in more populist, like, anti-elite rhetoric than the Democrats can, because when the Democrats do it, all their consultants get nervous, and when Trump does it, all their consultants know that he's just lying.
It's Nazi Germany, straight up. It's just pure fascism. That's all this is. It worked. It worked 100 years ago. And it's seemingly working right now. And it's not just the States of America. It's all across Western Europe. The only country that bucked the trend of the incumbency disadvantage seemingly was Mexico. Mm-hmm. One must ask the question why an old doddering man who was still, relatively telegenic, even though he believed in wood elves, duendes, was able to get a tremendous amount of popularity and then become the transition candidate that actually passed the torch to a younger woman, Claudia Sheinbaum. I'm, of course, talking about Mexico. I'm talking about AMLO is the old man. Claudia Sheinbaum was his spiritual and ideological successor in the Morena party. Why did that happen? Why was AMLO so popular? And why is Claudia Sheinbaum also incredibly popular? Why did Claudia Sheinbaum win the election with even larger margins of victory than AMLO did? It's because they expanded the welfare state, they increased minimum wage, and they made a whole bunch of decisions that genuinely improved the material conditions of a lot of people in Mexico. And that's something that people will never forget. We talked about...
Yeah, it does help that she seems to have like actual values and there's something that she believes in. You know, people vote on hope. People want to vote to make the future better. You know, people are not going to vote out of continuation of the status quo they're dissatisfied with. They're just not going to. I'm not going to be able to cover this for much longer because we're like 1/4 of the way through, and that would be insane. I want to get like a selective... Okay, the Hasan portion is 1 hour and 41 minutes. It's so good. Yeah, well, for the most part, Hasan is saying stuff that I've said. And I'm not saying he's cribbed it from me, of course. That'd be insane. I think that both he and I have arrived independently at more or less the same conclusions, because I think they're pretty standard populist conclusions. You know, like, I think a lot of people have arrived at these conclusions. I see how it is. I see how it is. You want to watch it. All right. Well, you know, I want to see how this ends. Okay? The people want this, so we watch. No, I don't stream often enough to dedicate that large a portion of my runtime to that sort of thing. I do, however, want to see how it ends, and you're just going to have to live with that. If you want to see more, you can watch the full thing. No content stealing.
Take away from Donald Trump becoming president is that, like, clearly we need somebody.
People want a fighter.
They want a fighter. They want a fighter. And like...
And you can't fight for opportunity economy and $50,000 in tax credits for startups. That is not something to fight for. You need to be a fighter, and you need to fight for things that are universally good and that people want. Healthcare, fixing the housing market, things like that.
Well, she did do that.
The problem with having this conversation with people like the Pod Save guys is that I genuinely don't think populism registers with him. Look at this. He was just like, yeah, she has to be a fighter. And then Hasan describes what she has to be a fighter on, and then he answers with, well, she did that. No, she didn't. She wasn't a fighter on any of these issues. She had a few means-tested policies, and she was incredibly weak in arguing for them. She also needs the mandate of the party behind her, not just her alone saying it. She needs like an entire unified front. They don't understand populism. I'm going to be honest with you guys. If you have to ask, well, what's the value of populism in a conversation about winning next time, I don't think you're going to be that populist. I think you have it or you don't. Liberalism's a brain disease, man. Like how you're never going to motivate people who think and act like this to wake up one day and go like, oh, wow, you're right. It is a popularity contest, and I do have to care about messaging. You know? You're not that guy. You don't understand.
Yeah, I just like I agree with you.
But again, even her communication on that is like, so much of the Democratic Party is now officially captured by what we would look back in the past as like unimaginably right-wing economic policies, like tax cuts and a public-private partnership. When I hear those words, I'm like, I'm not regime pilled.
Yeah,
I want to be regime pilled. I want to champion the social democratic regime. I want to make the Democratic Party look like... I want to make the Democratic Party make Olof Palme look like a fucking revisionist right-wing reactionary. Okay. That's what I want. I want trains.
I want trains.
I want better public transit.
Better transit.
I want
more. I want
socialized housing. Like,
okay.
But you're stopping.
I don't know, but like, what do you mean? We can't get into it. We got out of time. We've gone so long.
What I'm saying is like...
See, yeah, like Hasan is spitting here, but it's not registering with this guy because in his head he's thinking, but the graphs, but the charts, but the studies showed a 2.3% increase in standard of living if people had only listened to Kamala Harris and accepted the $50,000 tax credit or whatever, I
am for building millions upon millions of houses everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how?
That's what I'm for.
Yeah. But no public-private partnership. Build it with federal, publicly funded employees, and build it as a mechanism to claw back the insane housing market prices, to lower them by force.
Okay,
that's what I think.
See, look, he's like fed up with it. He's like, okay, yeah, whatever, man. I mean, I know that, like, you know, I know they did that during the New Deal, and it literally brought us out of the Great Depression and led to the greatest era of prosperity and, wealth equality in the history of the United States, and that everything got better. But, like, okay, yeah, like, whatever, play the socialists. Okay.
All right.
I think if you said that, a lot of Americans would be like, I like that idea.
I think if a
That's not quite correct. The New Deal program was a public-private partnership. There were, I mean, well, it wasn't just one program, right? There were like wide swaths of it, but like certainly the federal government exercised much more control over the way those the funding was spent and how those projects were directed. There was a huge mural, and also my gym at the high school that I grew up at were built by FDR. Personally, no, they were built through the New Deal, but like that money wasn't just like, because nowadays a public-private partnership literally just means the government gives the private company money and they do whatever they want. That's not even an exaggeration. There are so many public-private partnerships where it's like, we have given an ungodly amount of money to a corporation in, you know, with like maybe 10 years from now, we'll investigate whether they use that money appropriately. Meanwhile, in the New Deal, there was some direct, like just like on the ground, public federal workforces on out there, you know? There were so many strings attached. It was like they wove a blanket around them. I don't know. Very, very, very different. I mean, that might be just a broader conversation, Yeetity. You know, there's a limit to how much you can get into, you know?
Democratic politician got up there and said, we are gonna employ millions of Americans. We're gonna have a national jobs program to employ millions of Americans building millions of houses. I think that'd be very popular. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You regime pilled as well.
I am regime pilled. Now, I did go on your feed yesterday to see what you've been up to.
Oh my God.
And can we just put this up?
I think I know what you're going to post.
I'm glad I
was looking for what your reaction was to the Harris campaign podcast, and I just found this, and I just thought, is this
okay? That wasn't what I expected him to pull up, but it's cool.
What the Joe Rogan of the left would post?
I think Joe Rogan posts sexy
Donald
pics of
Trump.
himself.
Donald Trump wins, and you're like, I think I know what I need to do. I need to post Hull.
Yeah.
You getting good reactions to this? Is this getting you what you need?
Well, I wanted to show my.
Well, I can't tell. Is he actually like? Does he actually think this is unprofessional? I think he's ribbing Hasan, because it would be wild if he was actually like put off by it or something. I think he's ribbing. Yeah.
Progress. It's been a while. You know, that's like from 2021 till now, and I mean, I do talk about my fitness journey quite a bit.
You do Pilates?
What?
You do Pilates?
No, I train. I weight train, and then I play basketball.
What are you doing for cardio? Nothing?
Basketball.
Basketball?
Yeah, I play basketball 3 times a week, sometimes 4. And that's been very good. I also track my macro nutrients. I track all my calories.
Well, I wonder, for cutting, I wonder what caloric deficit he runs. I'm lazy as shit and haven't worked out in years, so when I'm dieting, it's usually like 1,800 calories, which is pretty low for someone with my like resting, you know, like basal metabolic rate. He's probably cutting at 4,000. He might, unironically, like probably around 3,000.
What does that do for you?
What do you mean? It's that right
You think
there.
that's what it's doing?
Picture on the right. That's how
so?
I got there.
Oh.
Yeah.
I use Manjaro. It's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
I have family members that use it as well, and it's been
cool.
very helpful.
Yeah, I don't have to think about it anymore.
Well, yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. Do you feel like it's stopped your other addictive tendencies as well?
I'm a better driver. Isn't that weird?
Maybe because you're not on your phone or something?
No, I think it's because
I can't read this guy's tone very well, to be honest.
I'm not spending so much of my like mental energy on like diet, and so like I'm just a little bit less kind of spent and like kind of, I don't know, impulsive around other things, and so like I don't feel some need to like get home 2 minutes faster. It's hard to explain. Like I don't feel as much of a need to find justice on the roads.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You asked me. No, I 100% get it. You asked me like why you track your calories or whatever. Like I get a lot of.
I do feel like there's like a hunger for like something broader than just a political program, but like more of a kind of way of grappling with the fact that this
he's talking about lifestyle politics, and the truth is that lifestyle politics have always been the correct way to engage in it. FDR, JFK, they both understood this perfectly well. Ever since it's been possible to follow the life of a politician, like, you know, post radio, basically, like not just TV, but like even with radio, fireside chats or whatever, like the Democrat consensus on this, or the impulse from their side of things, I think, is that politics is this boring procedural thing that you touch in on once every 2 years, and it's all policy based, and that's all, you know, when in reality, truly popular leaders have never been defined by their policy, but by their messaging. They've been defined by this broader cult of personality that's built around them. And you can have an issue with cults of personality if you want, like, that's totally fine. But FDR had one, and he also did a lot of good for this country. So, like, yes, ideally, leftist thought leaders are not just going on there to go policy charts, graphs or whatever, but yeah, they'd be like fit posting, they'd be like getting engaged in like local sports or whatever. 100%, yeah, they'd have strong opinions on a bunch of cultural issues because it humanizes them, because it makes them more relatable. That's part of my appeal. That's part of Hasan's appeal. The fact that I don't just get on here and spout policy or whatever, but I engage in like a broader, like you get a broader slice of my personality. Likewise with him.
Version of modern life kind of dares us to ruin our own lives.
Yeah,
you know,
I offer that in my broadcasts every day. I mean, I talk about my own personal journeys, and I offer advice. I used to have an advice segment as well. I haven't done it in a while, but like you know, I'm going to bring it back. And that's why I also like collaborate with other content creators, even if I don't align with them politically, agree with them politically at all. But, you know, there are plenty of people that I know who are my friends, who I think...
Hasan talked about you for a bit in the stream today. I think that Hasan's attitude towards me is and probably will remain almost exclusively like, not antagonistic necessarily, but like dismissive, tinged with antagonism, and that's probably never going to change because of my pariah status within the leftist community. Not really in a position to complain on my part because I've still done pretty well for myself, but you know, I'm mostly concerned with like, as the world gets worse in the next few years. You both do that to each other. I don't really dismiss or antagonize Hasan. I mean, I've criticized him plenty, but to be honest, I just don't really care. Like a lot of the needling little drama stuff, the whole point of the Fortress arc, or whatever the fuck we want to call it in retrospect, was like, how much can this, I guess, brand, or how much can this platform exist outside of this like stupid, incessant, myopic like death spiral where you know, are always gossip mongering and always shit talking and so on and so forth. And I just don't really care. I like to think that my opinions on people are more or less the product of like legitimately, you know, how I feel about them and what I think they do. And for the most part, of course, Hasan does a good job. I haven't seen his coverage of the recent developments in Aleppo. I really hope that he's not an Assadist. I don't think he is, but to be honest, I don't know. But in all seriousness, yeah, it's pretty much, he's not. Oh, allegations beaten. Hasan is not an Assadist.
As long as they're like relatively charitable and good and kind people, even if we don't agree on everything politically, it doesn't matter.
Anyway, like, as the world gets worse in the coming years, I'm mostly concerned with, like, you know, being a good figure, having a good message, providing guidance and advice to people who feel disillusioned with the world, because their disillusionment is legitimate. I'm not trying to do that liberal de-radicalizing bullshit where you take people who are frustrated with the world and you're like, no, don't worry, the world is already fine. See, we have Pell Grants.
And you know, I find myself in these bro spaces a lot. I've been on almost every single podcast that Trump has been on.
Yeah.
And many of them are run by my friends. Like,
I wonder if Hasan even believes in his tired doublespeak or just does it for views. What doublespeak has Hasan engaged in over the course of the entire interview that we've seen? A lot of people have joined the stream today and are talking for the first time, which is usually a good sign. And a lot of them have been shit-talking Hasan in a way that makes me think they're bots. But you've been talking about, like, a bunch of stuff, you know, so I guess you seem fine, like you're not a bot. I just don't understand what you're referring to exactly, because it seems like kind of baseless mongering. You know what I mean? Yeah, I saw that one, nuts.
Impulsive. My buddy Mike Malak is Logan Paul's co-host. not the biggest fan of Logan Paul, but I love Mike. Mike is a fantastic human being. He has an incredible journey of overcoming addiction, and he wrote about it as well. He had a New York Times bestseller. Bradley Martin with the Nelk Boys. I don't really know the Nelk Boys, but like Bradley Martin I like a lot. He owned that for good. And I try to use that to like explain to people that like it's not cool to, you know, shit on random people for no reason. They're like, let them live. Like, what the fuck is this to you? It's not going to fix your life.
All right. It seems like we pretty much watched the interview. I skipped the middle chunk, but if you want that, you'll have to watch their thing. Really, though, I'm glad this conversation is being had, and I genuinely hope that people in the consultancy space see this and they don't think of Hasan as like, oh, okay, he's like a frat boy with a big platform, whatever. You know, I really hope they look at this and they build off of it, and or just they take something to heart, man. That would be my hope. I think so far the response that I've seen to this, I saw some social media buzz. It seems largely positive, you know? And yeah, it seems like the people here are mostly positive on the conversation. I just wish politicians didn't hire consultants. Well, even in a good world, they would have to. I just wish those consultants didn't also, like, work for BlackRock. You know what I mean? Like, the consultancy is one thing, but then, like, oh, yeah, we hired them from a firm that also does work for General Electric. And also, they're all exclusively, like, upper middle class or upper class Ivy League graduates. Like, okay, what perspective do they fucking have on the world today? He talks about you here around the 309 mark here to watch. Oh no, I appreciate the offer, but like I've been directed to over the course of my career about 100,000 vague like someone talked about you, and it's always the same, you know, dismissal or contempt. I welcome their contempt. We're FDR posting. They are unanimous in their contempt for me, and I welcome it. Thank you.